Neat Nation, you beautiful people. Today we're here to answer a very important question. I mean, I dig this whiskey. Stagg Jr is one of my favorites. It's barrel-proof Buffalo Trace, and it's amazing. Problem is it's very hard to find, and most places don't sell it for MSRP anymore. And if you're a little crazy and want to get it on the secondary market, it's going to set you back a few bills. So, is there an alternative to Stagg Jr that actually tastes like Stagg Jr? Because if you're looking for a product from another distillery that kind of tastes like Stagg Jr, it's going to be hard to find. It's pretty hard to find. Doubtful that you'll find something close. I may have a lead on something, but I gotta wait till it's bottled. We'll see. Thus far, though, I really don't think that there's a great substitute for Stagg Jr until I found this. Is Benchmark Foolproof a good substitute for Stagg Jr? This is barrel-proof Buffalo Trace, almost barrel-proof, 125 proof Buffalo Trace. Is this a good substitute for Stagg Jr? Granted, you can only get it in like Indiana or something. Very difficult to come by. But I got this on the shelf for 20 bucks. That's a great deal. 20 bucks is insane for barrel-proof Buffalo Trace. But I think, having tasted these already, and I will taste them again, I think we're going to see some impacts of age that are important when it comes to trying to find an adequate substitute. Before we get into the topic, you guys know there's a bunch of links down below. That's how you can help out the channel. You can find more content and watch. That's a great way you can support the channel. I appreciate that. You can like, comment, and subscribe. That is rad. Also, you can support on Patreon if you want and get access to some upcoming barrel picks. Well, barrel picks that we've done that are currently in the, well, let's say processing. Avail yourself of the links below. Now let's answer the question. Is this an adequate substitute for this? Well, let's taste, shall we? I mean, it's all going to come down to taste. Certainly, when it comes to pricing, we're liking the Benchmark better than the Stagg Jr. $20 versus $60 MSRP, but in all likelihood, you're going to drop a Franklin or more to get Stagg Jr. anymore. Just to be clear, too, I have batch 14 of Stagg Jr. here, which isn't the legendary status of batch 12 or batch 15, but it doesn't suck. Always remember when you're drinking to stay hydrated. We'll start with a little benchmark here with Stagg Jr. Something to measure up the actual benchmark too. Now Stagg Jr. is a powerful whiskey. Batch 14, 130.2 proof. So, 5 proof points higher than the benchmark. What I get is a lot of vanilla and a lot of brown sugar. Not a lot of spice. Maybe a touch of cinnamon, more like pumpkin spice. Very slight. But we're not talking about herbaceous notes. It's not really prevalent in Buffalo Trace whiskeys. We're not talking about minty notes, so no clove. Clove is kind of out. Menthol's kind of out. It's all sweet, syrupy, desserty kind of vibes up in Buffalo Trace. Generally speaking, Stagg Jr. in this batch in particular being kind of straightforward brown sugar, caramel, maple syrup, touch of cinnamon. The influence of the barrel is there. I don't get pronounced oak. Like, it's not like, oh, there's a big oak. No. That said, it certainly rounds out the flavor. You're going, yeah, this spent some time in a barrel. Stagg Jr. is what a big, bold, brash, sweet bourbon tastes like. Not spicy. So, big, bold, brash, sweet, not spicy bourbon tastes like. And to me, it's awesome. It's what I go to when I want something big and sweet. It's full, it's intense, it delivers notes that I dig on the regular. Now, certainly, sometimes I want something spicier. If that's the case, I'm going to go Knob Creek, probably. I'm a big fan of Knob Creek. If I want something a touch nuttier without spice, probably Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. All great. Knob Creek single barrels, or the 12 years, they're fantastic. Stagg Jr. fantastic. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof fantastic. So those, Knob Creek and Elijah Craig, do make great substitutes for Stagg Jr. and you can find them. but they're not substitutes in terms of actually delivering on the flavor. When I picked up this bottle, I thought, you know what? It might be a good substitute for the flavor because it's the same juice. I've already tasted this, but we're going to crack this one open and taste it live. Not live, I mean, I'm recording this, but fresh bottle pop. Unfortunately, a screw top, but whatever. I actually don't mind a screw top because then you don't have any bad influence of cork on the whiskey, and it seals well. Doesn't communicate as much quality, but it's kind of relative. So comparing this to the Stag, as we get into it, the nose is nice, but it's more of a honey, graham cracker, some raw grains on the nose. It has some sweet notes, but it's not all sweetness. A little grassy, maybe even a touch more floral than the Stagg Jr. It doesn't have the richness that the Stagg Jr does in terms of its sweetness. It's lighter notes. So that's telling me maybe this whiskey didn't spend as long in the barrel as the Stagg Jr. Would that be surprising? No, it would not be surprising. I mean, this one is 20 bucks, this one is 60 bucks. So I'm going to imagine this spent about half the time in the barrel. Remember, Benchmark is the bottom shelf brand for the Buffalo Trace mash bill number 1. That means that I imagine most of the barrels going into this product are fairly young, kind of off-profile barrels that they're not using for Buffalo Trace, or they're more premium brands. So because it doesn't have an age statement on it, age at least this many years, I'm going to assume it's 4 years old because it is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So we can know that this is 4-year-old at least. Given the nose, I'm thinking it may not be much more than that. I've tasted a lot of craft whiskeys this year, and I know what a young whiskey smells like. Kind of smells like this. But can the palate make up for it? Will it deliver boldness and richness and depth that are not evident on the nose? Well, let's find out. Get a little fresh cherry. It's some apple, kind of fruity. Not as deep of a sweetness as on the Stagg Jr. But then I also get grainy elements. I get graham cracker, which I love graham crackers, but this is like graham cracker with this kind of unprocessed grain note that is, again, evident, shows up amidst young whiskeys. It's kind of a dead giveaway that this didn't spend a whole heck of a lot of time in a barrel. It is definitely the grainiest, nuttiest Buffalo Trace product I've ever had. I wouldn't describe Buffalo Trace, as I mentioned earlier, as nutty in the least. Actually, I hadn't had a product until I had this that I thought, you know what? That's kind of nutty. Kind of this sweet, nutty, classic, straightforward bourbon. It's kind of what this tastes like. Granted, it's a little higher proof. Now, for the proof point, at 125, not super hot. Very easy to drink. Kind of crushable. And I'd say this is going to do the job if I'm looking for a really solid, high proof, fairly cheap bourbon. Really cheap, given its proof, actually, and the fact that it's from Buffalo Trace. So it's going to do the job there. But going back to the Stagg Jr., and like, the nose just invites you in. Like, I picture a birthday cake covered in maple syrup and with brown sugar crumbled over the top of this thing, like crumble top birthday cake with maple syrup. I can just sit here and sniff it all day. Granted, as I mentioned, it's not a terribly complex whiskey. Like it's sweet and brown sugary, and that's kind of it. Not nutty, not very floral, not very fruity, but delicious in what it does for me, which is deliver a really round, viscous, sweet flavor profile. Coming back to the Benchmark, it's got too much raw grain. Like, it has too much nut. Almost a surprising amount of nuttiness. It reminds me of a payday bar. Like, it's got some caramel, it's got some nougat, but then it's got this kind of funky peanut. It reminds me a lot of a payday bar. So, while it's not a bad whiskey at all, not a bad whiskey whatsoever, I kind of enjoy it, but I don't enjoy it near as much as the Stagg Jr. And the flavor profile is so different, I wouldn't even peg them from the same distillery. If you gave these to me blind, I would tell you that this is probably Heaven Hill, maybe, like a youngish Heaven Hill product. But I don't know of a Heaven Hill barrel proof that is as like young in profile as this guy. So I might be going, well, maybe it's Beam. Like, could it be Old Grandad 114? Now, it's not nearly that peanutty, and it doesn't have some of the like dill kind of characteristics, maybe a little mint that Old Grandad 114 has, but it definitely doesn't taste anything like Buffalo Trace. So while it's a solid, interesting whiskey that does convey some youth, if we're asking the question, would it make a good substitute for Stagg Jr.? The answer is no. No, it would not. Good whiskey. Good whiskey for like taking hunting. Where you go to the lodge and you're like, boys, I got the bourbon. Bam. And you pass it around, the lodge, and everybody's taking pulls from the bottle or pouring themselves bourbon in a Dixie cup. A great whiskey for that occasion. Definitely. I'm very, very unrefined and kind of gloriously so. But not Stagg Jr. whatsoever. So before we wrap up, let's just talk a little bit about why that it might be. Well, if you ever had Buffalo Trace White Dog, which you can get at certain places, you can go into like a Binny's in Chicago and pick up White Dog Buffalo Trace. It doesn't taste like anything like Buffalo Trace. It doesn't even taste good. Most White Dog doesn't taste like good by itself. You can kind of tell that it's good distillate, but it doesn't necessarily taste like something you just want to go ahead and drink. So it needs time in the barrel. It needs time in good barrels to pick up good barrel flavor, to bring the spirit and the barrel into a period of perfect coalescence, where the spirit has absorbed all of the good, delightful qualities of the barrel. Their relationship has been fully consummated, and you get a harmonious whiskey that has all the best characteristics of the distillate and all of the sweet, glorious vanilla, caramel, brown sugar, and a touch of oak that makes it amazing. That's basically what has happened in Stagg Jr. Some of the rougher notes of the distillate have been lost, still conveys a lot of heat, but it's absorbed a lot of awesome notes from the wood. Now, it's not terribly oaky, it's not drying, but a lot of that vanilla sweetness and that big brown sugar, that comes from the barrel. If you taste the White Dog, you're not getting those notes out of the White Dog. This benchmark has a lot of kind of rough, funky, nut grain stuff that is still left over from the original distillate. Now, add some complexity to this product. I think there's a lot more notes probably I could pull out from this than from this, but I don't like these notes as much because it reminds me of young whiskey, and they're just not this syrupy, desserty delightfulness that the Stagg Jr. is. So in these two products, I think it's kind of a really nice case study in what barrel time and barrel selection can do. I imagine that the barrels that were selected that went into this, it probably wasn't quite as carefully curated as a batch of Stagg Jr. And I imagine it's like half the age on average, where we're talking probably like 5-year average in this. We're talking probably like 7, 8 years in this. So we probably have like 4 to 5, 6 to 8, maybe higher. We don't know exactly how old Stagg Jr. is. Could be as much as 10. Who's to say? But this one definitely has a lot more barrel time, years I'd imagine, over this one, and it shows in the flavor profile. And you can do this with other distilleries as well, where you taste similar products of varying age statements next to each other and see what the impact is on aging time. Of course, if they're from different brands, the distilleries may also be like picking out certain flavor profiles that show up in certain barrels, so it's not just age, it's certain kind of variations in flavor profile that they're bottling for different brands. But sometimes it is just the influence of extra time in the barrel that makes a whiskey taste different. And generally, I think more time equals better. There is of course, law of diminishing returns. It's not always that more time in a barrel equals better whiskey, which I should do a whole video on, because eventually the whiskey starts to pull out too much oak. It just becomes super woody, funky, earthy, drying, mouth drying, and you actually lose some of the positive characteristics of the original distillate that you might have wanted to keep for a nice dynamic pour. Again, lots more we could talk about there. We won't do it today. Hope you guys enjoyed that video and my take on these whiskeys. The fact that this is not a great substitute for Stagg Jr, but it's a pretty solid bourbon, especially at 20 bucks. I think it's going to make my coworker very happy because I plan to give it to Garrett. Y'all, don't forget to hit the links down below. If you want more content from me about Buffalo Trace type stuff, I'm going to throw some links down in there. What's the deal with Buffalo Trace? What's the deal with Blanton's? Those were dank videos. You guys can check them out. Links right down there. So watch those. And then tune in Thursday night. I've got a live stream with Brian Bikey, a band of bourbon. We're celebrating my birthday, which will be rad. And then we're also celebrating 1 year of the Drew P. Whiskey channel. It's been a year. That's... wow. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of things happened this year that I wasn't necessarily anticipating. Barrel picks, making a lot of new friends, so that's been rad. Come hang out on Thursday, 8 o'clock Central Time, and celebrate with us. Till then, y'all, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep it neat.